The sudden silence that fell across the long line of passengers was like a blade slicing through the air. Everyone stopped, their eyes fixed on the counter at gate B42. A slender 17-year-old girl stood trembling, clutching her boarding pass as if it were the last thread holding her future together. Across from her, a gate agent with eyes as cold as steel narrowed them in deliberate suspicion. At a place as ordinary as an airport gate, a confrontation was about to ignite into a tremor that could shake the foundations of the American aviation system. Maya Brooks drew in a deep breath, her chest tightening as though it might shatter. Before her lay the flight to London, the beginning of a prestigious STEM program at Cambridge, the culmination of years of relentless striving. Her mother, Dr. Liana Porter, had once told her, "Go out there and change the world." Those words echoed in Maya's head, but they wavered against the reality that the woman at the gate, Carol Hargrove, was looking at her as if she were an imposter. Carol tilted her head, the light catching her glasses, her lips pressed into a hard line. "This photo doesn't look much like you." Her voice rang out, sharp and cold, slicing through the already tense atmosphere and leaving Maya breathless. The passport had been issued less than 6 months ago, the only difference being her hair now braided instead of hanging loose as in the picture. But that tiny detail was weaponized against her. The crowd behind began to stir, some sighing, others casting furtive, judgmental glances. Maya felt like a defendant in a courtroom, with Carol as the merciless judge. She steadied her voice, soft but firm. "It is me. I have the confirmation letter from Cambridge and a signed authorization from my mother. I can show you now." Carol did not even glance at the documents. She shrugged, her blood-red nails tapping against the counter with a deliberate rhythm. "I don't need a biography. I need to be sure this is legitimate." And then, like the cruelest blow, Carol lifted the passport high under the light, her eyes flashing with a mocking glint. Suddenly, her fingers loosened. The navy blue booklet, embossed with the golden U.S. seal, slipped downward in a slow, theatrical fall. But instead of landing on the counter, it flipped once in the air and dropped neatly into the mouth of the trash can, vanishing among crumpled coffee cups and scraps of paper. Time froze. The faint thud echoed in Maya's head like thunder. Carol's voice was flat, almost indifferent. "Oops. Slipped. Looks like you dropped your passport." Dozens of witnesses stood by, yet not one stepped forward. They only stared with pity, or worse, with apathy. Maya's heart pounded, her scalp tightened as if it would burst. She knew with absolute clarity no passport meant no flight, no Cambridge, no future. All the effort, the late nights, the sacrifices, discarded in an instant with the flick of a hand. Her voice broke as she spoke. "You threw it away. I saw you." Carol remained unmoved, not even raising her eyes. "If you lost your documents, call security. I have other passengers to deal with." The word security hissed like a death sentence. Maya's mind spun with visions of being detained, filling out reports, missing the flight, watching her dream collapse. She stepped back, her hands shaking as she pulled out her phone. On the screen, only one name glowed. Mum. The call buzzed once, twice, then a steady voice, warm yet steely, came through. "Maya, are you at the gate? Is everything all right?" Hearing her mother's voice cracked the shell she had been trying to hold. Maya burst into tears. "Mom, she threw my passport in the trash. She said the picture didn't match." "They won't let me board." 3 seconds of silence followed, stretching like an eternity. In those 3 seconds, the weight of the world shifted into the hands of one woman. Dr. Liana Porter was not just a mother. She was the Deputy Director of Air Traffic Safety at the FAA, one of the most powerful figures in American aviation. And when she spoke again, her voice was no longer a mother's, it was a command. "Name of the employee? Carol Hargrove. Airline flight number gate. Global Wings, 8:15 to London. Gate B442. Liana inhaled, her tone deep and sharp, each word carved into stone. "Listen to me. Do not leave. Do not argue further. Stand there and look straight at the gate. That plane is not going anywhere." Maya's breath caught. "But Mom, boarding is done. The doors are about to close. Trust me, that plane will return. This is an order." The certainty in her mother's voice pulled Maya back from the brink. She stood still, tears streaming down her cheeks, but a spark of hope flickered within her. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., a storm was already being unleashed from Liana's office, and within minutes, the pilots, the passengers, and those who thought they had cornered a trembling girl would learn. True power did not lie at the check, encounter, but in the woman behind a single phone call. JFK Airport remained as noisy as ever, but to Maya, all the sounds faded into the distance. Only her mother's steady voice came through the small speaker of her phone, firm and unwavering. On the other end of the line, in a fluorescent-lit office in Washington, D.C., Dr. Liana Porter was turning maternal instinct into a full-scale emergency maneuver. Fingers flew across the keyboard. A command echoed through the FAA's internal system. "Computer, connect me to JFK Duty Manager. Urgent." A gravelly male voice answered almost at once. "Grant here. I'm busy." "Thomas Grant, this is Dr. Liana Porter, Deputy Director of Air Traffic Safety, FAA, ID 477, Delta. I am reporting a Level 2 incident at Gate B42. Silence struck the other end. When he spoke again, Grant's tone was no longer casual, but strained and formal. "Yes, ma'am. Please continue." A gate agent, Carol Hargrove, deliberately discarded a U.S. citizen's passport into a trash can, then denied that passenger boarding on the 8:15 flight to London. The direct witness is a minor passenger. This is a grave breach of security protocol. Grant inhaled sharply. He understood the implications immediately. If the FAA confirmed this, the entire flight could be held. And that was precisely what Liana was about to order. "I am instructing you to coordinate with the control tower and issue a gate return for Flight 815. The aircraft cannot depart when a front-line staff member is under suspicion of a security violation." Grant stammered, his voice tight. "But, ma'am, the aircraft has already pushed back. Engines are starting." Liana's voice cut through, cold and absolute. "This is not a recommendation. This is an official FAA directive. If you fail to comply, I will record this as insubordination and hold you personally accountable." The duty office at JFK seemed to tremble. Sweat beaded on Grant's forehead as he lunged for the radio. "Control tower, this is Duty Manager Grant. FAA order. Hold Global Wings 815. Immediate gate return to B-42. Confirm. Urgent. Inside the Boeing 787, passengers were stowing bags, fastening belts. Captain Robert Hale received the radio call, his face darkening. He lifted the microphone, his voice steady but gravelly. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've received instructions from air traffic control. This flight must return to the gate due to a procedural issue. Please remain seated." Groans rippled through the cabin. Annoyed glances. Businessmen checked their watches. Children pestered parents with questions. Frustration spread quickly, but none of them knew that outside, a young girl was fighting for her dignity. At gate B-42, Carol Hargrove smirked as she began gathering paperwork, smug with the thought of having put a passenger in her place. But her smile froze as she caught sight of the massive jetliner, not rolling toward the runway, but slowly taxiing back. The crowd that had lingered near the gate murmured in confusion. "What's happening? Why is the plane coming back?" Carol tried to compose herself, but her heart hammered in panic. This wasn't a technical fault. Instinct told her it was something far worse. Maya stood silently by a column, phone pressed to her ear. Her mother's voice whispered firmly, "Do you see? They're bringing the plane back. Don't be afraid. In just a few minutes, the truth will come out." Maya looked through the thick glass as the aircraft's blinking lights drew closer. Her chest tightened, a mix of nerves and a strange, rising hope. Moments later, two men in grey suits strode toward the gate, their steps sharp and decisive. Flanking them were two Port Authority police officers. The tall, stern man was Thomas Grant. Beside him, younger but equally resolute, was Kenji Mori, station manager of Global Wings. Carol swallowed hard. "Mr. Grant, is there an issue with the aircraft?" Grant did not reply. Kenji advanced, his voice low but seething. "We've received reports of a serious security breach at this gate. Your name is Carol Hargrove." "Why, yes. But this is a misunderstanding, I didn't." One officer, Eleanor Rivera, raised her hand. "Step away from the counter, ma'am. We need to preserve the scene." Carol froze, her face draining of color. The arrogance from earlier drained away, replaced by visible fear. Maya's heart pounded as she watched. Minutes ago, she had been humiliated, made into a spectacle. Now the tables had turned. The once powerful gate agent stood, trembling, pulled from her post. Grant turned to Kenji. "We need physical evidence. The trash bin, right there." Officer Rivera slipped on gloves, lifting out the bag. Every eye followed. The crinkle of plastic sounded like the slicing of truth itself. And then, emerging from the refuse, soaked with coffee, was a navy blue booklet. "Passport, Maya Brooks," Rivera announced clearly. The crowd erupted. Gasps, whispers, disbelief. Carol stumbled back. "No, it fell by accident." "I didn't." Grant's glare was ice. Kenji raised his hand. "Bring the CCTV footage. The truth will speak for itself." Within minutes, the screen would show undeniable proof. Carol dropping the passport into the trash, a fleeting smirk curling her lips. Maya drew a deep breath, her hands still trembling, but inside her chest, something new burned. This wasn't only vindication. This was a reversal, a moment where a girl once belittled now stood firm, while the woman who abused her power bowed before justice. The door to her future had opened, and for Maya, this was only the beginning. A tablet was brought forward, its screen glowing in the tense circle of onlookers. Naveen Patel, an IT technician, fumbled nervously, knowing he stood before some of the most powerful figures at the airport. Thomas Grant snatched it from his hands and passed it to Kenji Mori. "Camera 42, Bravo feed. This angle is the clearest." Naveen stammered. Kenji nodded, eyes fixed on the screen. "Play it. Now." A tap. And then the images appeared. The crowd held its breath. From above, the camera captured the gate. There was Maya Brooks approaching, a timid smile on her face. Carol leaned over, scrutinizing, shaking her head with disdain. Maya began to falter, her hands trembling as she offered more documents. Then came the decisive moment. Carol turned, passport in hand, and deliberately dropped it into the trash. Not an accident, not a slip, a deliberate, calculated move. The camera even caught the faint smirk of triumph curling on her lips. The footage froze. Silence crushed the space. Carol's face drained of color. I didn't mean to. It was, Grant's voice cut like steel. Don't. The camera doesn't lie. A heavy murmur rippled through the nearby staff. Every eye turned toward Carol, as if she were a criminal caught red-handed. Behind them, Maya felt a wave of clarity wash over her. The shame she had just endured, the pitying stares, the helpless trembling, was now reversed. She hadn't needed to scream or prove anything. Technology itself had spoken for her. Kenji Mori exhaled and stepped forward, his expression carved in stone. "Carol Hargrove, you have served Global Wings for 12 years. And this is how you treat a passenger, a child traveling alone, carrying a valid passport. I was stressed. It was busy today, Kenji's voice cracked like a whip, cutting through her excuses. Stress? A mistake? A mistake is typing the wrong name. A mistake is spilling coffee on paperwork. But this is deliberate destruction of a federal document. This is malice, not error." Carol staggered back, only to be blocked by Officer Rivera. Sweat dotted her forehead, her hands shaking uncontrollably. Maya watched, her heart racing with a swirl of emotions, relief, anger, and a profound conviction that justice could arrive, even if delayed. Her gaze landed briefly on Thomas Grant. He wasn't staring at Carol anymore, he was looking at her. In that glance, Maya saw something unexpected. Shame, as though he knew his system had allowed someone like Carol to remain in power, leaving scars on countless passengers. Kenji signaled to the officers. "Take her. This evidence is more than enough to open a prosecution file." Rivera nodded. "Carol Hargrove, you are coming with us for questioning. And remember, interfering with a passport is a federal crime. The district attorney's office will want to speak with you." Carol panicked, her voice breaking into frantic cries. "I can't lose my job. I have a family. This is all a mistake." But no one answered. Only the cold grip of law tightened on her arm, leading her away beneath a sea of scornful stares. The air around the gate felt heavy. Maya's knees wobbled. She had been dragged to the edge of despair, and now stood at the heart of a storm of public reckoning. Kenji's gaze softened. He approached her, lowering his head slightly. "Maya Brooks, on behalf of Global Wings, I apologize. What you endured was unacceptable. This was not an incident. This was a betrayal of trust." He held out her passport, now cleaned, presenting it with both hands as though it were a sacred offering. "This is yours, and from this moment forward, we will ensure you are treated as an honored passenger." Maya could barely whisper. "Thank you." But in her heart, she knew who truly deserved her gratitude. The woman hundreds of miles away. Her mother, who had turned an entire Boeing 787 with a few phone calls. A flight attendant emerged from the jet bridge, tension written across his face. "Mr. Mori, the captain wants to know what's happening. Passengers are growing restless." Kenji looked at Grant, then at Maya. After a pause, he sighed, his words clear and decisive. "Tell the captain the matter has been resolved, and tell the crew. This young passenger will not sit in 34B. She will be in 1A, first class." A ripple of astonishment burst through the crowd, but this time it wasn't confusion, it was awe. The bystanders looked at Maya with eyes transformed, no longer pitying, but admiring. Maya's vision blurred with tears. Yet these weren't tears of fear or humiliation. They were tears of triumph, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been dismissed or diminished in the sterile halls of an airport, where rules were twisted into weapons by petty hands. She clutched her passport tight, and as she followed the attendant to board, she knew. Her true journey was only just beginning. The metal door of the jet bridge swung open, and the blast of cold air from the air conditioning washed over Maya Brooks's face, as if erasing the last traces of humiliation clinging to her from gate B42. She walked slowly behind the new attendant, each step trembling but steady. In her hand, the passport, once tossed into a trash bin like nothing, now felt weighty, like a symbol of victory. Passengers in the cabin turned their heads as she entered. Some eyes widened with surprise, others nodded with quiet sympathy. A few recognized her, the girl the gate agent had tried to humiliate. And now, she was being escorted like a VIP. Chief Flight Attendant Sylvia Park, her face gentle, though her eyes still carried a shadow of worry, bowed slightly. "Welcome aboard, Miss Brooks. Please follow me." Maya froze for a moment. Sylvia led her to the left, the way that led to first class. The cabin opened up like another world. No more noise of shuffling lines, no stale scent of leftover coffee, no clattering of suitcase wheels. Instead, there was soft lighting, leather seats wide as thrones, glowing screens, and crystal glasses sparkling in the hands of attendants. Sylvia guided her to seat 1A, the first seat by the window. "This is your place. From now on, you will be treated as the most honored passenger on this flight." Maya brushed her hand across the seat's surface, the leather cool and smooth. Part of her wanted to collapse into it, to believe she wasn't dreaming. But another part still trembled, haunted by the memory of Carol Hargrove's sneer just minutes ago. An attendant brought her a glass of fresh orange juice in real glassware. "Miss Brooks, we are deeply sorry. If you need anything at all, you only have to ask." Maya pressed her lips together. From deep within her chest, emotions surged, gratitude, hurt, relief. She nodded slightly, whispering, "Thank you." She leaned back into the seat. For a fleeting moment, her whole body felt weightless, as if finally freed from the claws of a nightmare. Outside, however, the crisis spread like oil across water. Kenji Mori entered a makeshift meeting room at the airport, phone pressed tightly to his ear. On the other end, at Global Wings headquarters in Atlanta, the PR team was shouting, "Kenji, what happened?" "Someone's live, tweeting that a 777 was forced to return to the gate because a gate agent threw away a miner's passport. The Post already has thousands of shares. Kenji's brows furrowed. He knew the crisis wasn't just about a trash can and a passport. This was a tidal wave that could drown the airline's reputation. Stay quiet, I'll handle it here. But listen closely. The FAA has already stepped in. Prepare for a full investigation. Silence fell on the other end. His words landed like hammers. In the cockpit, Captain Robert Hale listened to the latest report, his brows knitted tightly. He had flown for over 20 years, but had never seen a flight recalled for a gate return caused by an employee's misconduct. He adjusted his microphone, his voice steady but strained as he addressed the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, the situation has been resolved. We will be departing again shortly. Thank you for your patience. Murmurs rose. A businessman muttered, all this for a teenage girl. But for it to reach this level, she must not be ordinary. He did not know that outside, in first class, that very girl was asking herself, am I truly strong enough to keep moving forward? Maya looked out the window, watching the ground slide past as the 737 prepared to twee again. She opened her phone and typed, Mum, I'm sitting in 1A. They put me in first class. I can't believe it. Thank you. Because of you, everything changed. Within 10 seconds, the reply appeared. Maya, this is the least they could do. I am proud of you. You stood tall and you called me when you needed to. Now sit back, enjoy the flight, and prepare to change the world. A tear rolled down Maya's cheek. But unlike before, this one was born of gratitude. Further back in the plane, passengers in economy began whispering. Some were irritated by the delay, but many nodded quietly when they heard the rumor. That girl was insulted, but her mother is an FAA leader, and she made the plane turn back. News spread faster than Wi-Fi. In that moment, Maya, a small 17-year-old, became the center of attention on the entire 777. Sylvia Park returned, gently laying a hand on Maya's shoulder. Young lady, if you need anything at all, just press the call button. You are our honored guest today. Maya smiled softly. No longer the trembling smile she had worn at gate B42, but a quiet smile of conviction. I have survived a storm, and this is only the first page. The wings of the aircraft trembled, the engines roared, this time pushing the plane toward the runway for real. Maya closed her eyes, her hand still clutching the passport, whispering inside, I listened to you, Mum. I didn't give up. And now, I'm flying. But deep within Global Wings headquarters, phones still rang red hot. A media firestorm loomed, and the consequences for the airline, and for those who dared to belittle one small passenger, were only just beginning. In the first-class cabin, Maya Brooks finally rested her head against seat 1A. The rolls. Royce engines thundered. The fuselage trembled softly, and the runway lights swept past the window. She closed her eyes, trying to relax. Yet her heart still raced, as if refusing to believe that everything was truly over. Parallel to this fleeting calm in the cabin, an earthquake was shaking the headquarters of Global Wings in Atlanta. On the 12th floor, the PR board was in an emergency meeting. Walls lined with LED screens flashed with endless streams of tweets. Boeing 707 forced to return because a gate agent threw a passenger's passport into the trash. FAA intervenes directly. What kind of scandal is this? A 17-year-old girl stood up, and her mother is an FAA leader. Every second, the number of shares soared. A freelance journalist, seated on the very same flight, was live, tweeting the drama. The hashtag #GateB422 hit trending within half an hour. The PR director slammed the table, voice panicked. "We need to release a statement immediately. We can't let the story spread like wildfire." The regional CEO frowned. "A statement about what? We don't even know the full facts yet. And Mrs. Porter from the FAA is personally overseeing this case. One wrong word, and we're looking at fines in the tens of millions." The air was thick. Tension wound as tight as a violin string. With every passing second, Global Wing's stock price slipped further down the electronic board. Back at JFK, Kenji Mori entered a small briefing room with Thomas Grant and Officer Elena Rivera. The table was covered in paperwork, laptops open, a CCTV feed frozen on. Screen, evidence that could not be denied. Grant wiped sweat from his brow. "I've never seen the FAA stop a flight because of a single gate agent. Mrs. Porter, she's a storm." Kenji nodded. He understood this was no longer a single scandal but a reckoning. Liana Porter would not let go. And he knew if Global Wings did not act decisively, his own career could end that very day. "Begin drafting the internal report. Carol Hargrove has been taken into custody, but we must prove this was not company culture. This was one individual abusing her authority. Otherwise, the FAA will judge our entire system as rotten." Elena Rivera nodded, though her eyes were somber. "The issue isn't only about law. It's about ethics. That girl was publicly humiliated, and every passenger saw it. That stain won't wash out." In the skies above, the Boeing 707 cut through layers of cloud. In the first-class cabin, Maya opened her eyes and glanced at the flight map. London, the glowing dot ahead, drew closer. She typed a quick message to her mother. "Mom, I'm still shaking, but I think I've learned something. The truth can be buried for a while, but never forever." The reply came instantly. "That's right, Maya. And today you proved it. Let this journey be a beginning. Don't let fear ever eclipse your dreams." Maya smiled faintly, for the first time feeling pride not only because of her mother, but because of herself, for standing up, for refusing to stay silent. Meanwhile, down another hallway at JFK, Carol Hargrove sat in an interrogation room, her eyes vacant. Her uniform had been stripped away. Her employee badge lay on the table like a full stop at the end of a career. In front of her, the preliminary indictment was read aloud. "You are suspected of deliberately destroying federal documents. This act may constitute a criminal offense. You have the right to remain silent." Carol trembled. All the false authority, the condescending shakes of her head, the mocking smiles at passengers, everything had become a crushing weight breaking her down. When the plane touched down in London, Maya was the first to disembark. A company staff member stood holding her name on a placard, guiding her through priority clearance. Everything was smooth, a stark contrast to the hell at JFK. But the greatest surprise was yet to come. Amid the crowded arrivals hall, Maya froze. On the other side of the barrier, a familiar figure appeared, Dr. Liana Porter. No longer the stern FAA executive, but simply a mother, eyes red with tears, wrapping her daughter tightly in her arms. Maya dropped her suitcase and ran. The tears she had held back throughout the flight finally burst free. "Mom?" "Maya, you're safe now. It's over." In that moment, all the noise of the airport, the flashing screens, the overhead announcements, everything vanished. There was only a mother's embrace and the warmth of family. But the truth was, it wasn't over. This was only the beginning of a tidal wave of investigations, crisis, and change. Because from the moment that Passport fell into the trash bin at Gate B42, Maya and her mother had set in motion a chain of events that would shake the entire aviation industry. And Global Wings would pay dearly for a mistake that was never small at all. News spread faster than the 777 could fly. Before Maya Brooks even reached her dorm at Cambridge, the story of Gate B42 had taken over headlines everywhere. FAA forces Boeing 707 to return after gate agent throws minor passenger's passport into trash. 17-year-old girl and her powerful mother in Washington, D.C. shake an entire airline. Sensational headlines appeared one after another. The hashtag #justice. For Maya shot to #1 on Twitter within 24 hours. People shared the leaked CCTV clip, showing Carol Hargrove releasing her grip, that fleeting smirk on her face. A brief moment, but enough to destroy her 12-year career. At FAA headquarters in Washington, Dr. Liana Porter stepped out of a press conference that was short but thunderous. She spoke only a few words, sharp as steel. Aviation security is not just scanners or baggage checks. Security lives in every action of every employee. When a passenger is disrespected, the entire system is threatened, and the FAA will show no mercy. No more, no less. Yet the message made the entire U.S. aviation industry tremble. Meanwhile, at Global Wings headquarters in Atlanta, emergency meetings ran through the night. For the first time in months, the airline's CEO appeared on camera and bowed his head. "We apologize to Maya Brooks and her family, and to all passengers. We commit to a complete overhaul of training, supervision, and passenger handling procedures." But the press was not satisfied. A reporter asked coldly, "Are you apologizing for one employee, or for a corporate culture that allowed that employee to exist for 12 years? The question echoed like a hammer, striking Global Wings at its deepest wound. At Cambridge, Maya crossed through the ancient gates with her heart heavy. This should have been just a quiet journey to begin her studies, a private victory after years of effort. But now, she had become a symbol, a face on the news, across social media, in every discussion of passenger rights. International classmates whispered, "You're Maya, right? The FAA girl." Maya flushed with embarrassment. She had never wanted fame like this. But then a student approached with eyes full of respect. "Because of you, I believe even an ordinary person can stand up against injustice." Maya froze. That sentence planted a seed. This was not just her story. This was a lesson for thousands, even millions, who had once stayed silent under abuse of power. In London, inside their hotel before Maya moved into her dorm, mother and daughter sat together as sunset spilled across the room in fiery red. Maya asked softly, "Mum, did I cause too much trouble?" Liana smiled, took her daughter's hand, warm and steady. "Maya, trouble didn't come from you. Trouble comes when someone chooses cruelty. You only dared to speak up, and that is power." Maya lowered her head. Inside, a small flame began to burn. Meanwhile, Carol Hargrove, once standing so proud at Gate B42, now sat in a stark interrogation room. Her uniform was stripped, her badge laid flat on the table like a death sentence. A court-appointed lawyer explained, "If you plead guilty quickly, you may get a probation and a fine. But understand, tampering with a federal passport will follow you forever. No airline will ever hire you again." Carol buried her face in her arms. All the false authority she once wielded had crumbled, leaving only a bleak future. On television, pundits debated fiercely. Some praised the FAA's decisive action. Others worried the scandal might hurt thousands of innocent employees at Global Wings. But no one denied the truth. A 17-year-old girl and her mother had forced an entire industry to look in the mirror. That night, in her Cambridge dorm room, Maya's phone buzzed with a new email. From Kenji Mori. His message was brief. "Maya, I know these days have been heavy, but remember, because of your courage, an entire system is changing. If you ever wish, I hope one day to work alongside you in building a fairer flying experience for everyone." Maya read it again and again. Inside her, a new idea took root, that she could do more than study aviation engineering. Perhaps she could change the way the world itself worked. Over London, the moon shone across a quiet sky. But for Maya, this was not just another night. It was the beginning of a new chapter, where a girl once dismissed at Gate B442 would rise, not only as a student, but as a symbol of the change. Dawn in Cambridge was unlike anything in America. Ancient stone buildings draped in moss stood solemn under the soft glow of morning. Chapel bells echoed through the mist, and a thin veil of fog hovered over the still surface of the lake. Maya Brooks stepped out of her dormitory, clutching her STEM program materials tightly against her chest. Here, no one saw her as the FAA girl from JFK. Here she was simply a 17-year-old student, hungry to learn, eager to create. But deep within her, the memory of Gate B42 refused to fade. At times when friends laughed together or professors lectured about systems operating smoothly like Swiss clockwork, Maya would suddenly see Carol Hargrove's face, that disdainful glance, that deliberate hand dropping her passport into the trash. One moment of contempt had taught her a brutal truth. A clock only runs smoothly when every gear is set in its rightful place, and if even one gear is rotten, the entire system collapses. In her very first class, the silver-haired professor said, "Engineering is not just about building machines. Engineering is responsibility. One misaligned blade can destroy an engine. One wrong decision can bring down an entire aircraft." Maya shuddered. His words echoed as an extension of the lesson she had already lived at JFK. Just one decision from Carol had forced a Boeing 707 to return to the gate. And just one courageous decision of her own, calling her mother, had turned the tide. She scribbled notes furiously, not only for the knowledge, but for the sense that she was learning to make the world a better place. While Maya was beginning a new chapter at Cambridge, in Atlanta, Global Wings was facing a storm unlike anything it had ever known. In the emergency boardroom, the CEO sat at the head of the table, a mountain of reports stacked in front of him. Kenji Mori, fresh off a red eye from New York, spoke in a gravelly voice strained by sleepless nights. The FAA has officially launched a full investigation. They've requested 6 months of CCTV data from every hub. They've also sent us a list of 120 7-passenger complaints requiring responses within 14 days. A senior executive wiped sweat from his brow. We can't possibly meet those deadlines, and the shareholders are threatening to pull out. Just the hashtag GateB42 alone has slashed new bookings by 23% in only 3 days. The CEO slammed his hand on the table. We must turn this crisis into opportunity. We need to show the press we are reforming. I want a new program, complete retraining of all staff, and Mori, you will lead it. Kenji nodded, though in his eyes there was a flicker of exhaustion. He knew this was going to be a long and grueling road, but also the only chance left to salvage the airline's reputation. In her Cambridge dorm, Maya opened her laptop and read the email from Kenji. The whole system is changing, thanks to your courage. She stared at that line for a long time. Later, she joined a campus live stream where students debated ethics in engineering. When it was her turn to speak, Maya drew a deep breath and said, "We often think engineering is only about machines, but the truth is it begins with people. One wrong press of a button, one careless gesture, and the consequences spread farther than we imagine. I have lived through that." The room fell silent. Her classmates stared at her with wide eyes. Maya didn't reveal the details, but her words planted a seed. Technical responsibility is inseparable from moral responsibility. On the other side of the world, Carol Hargrove sat in a dim, rented apartment awaiting trial. The faint light cast sharp shadows on her gaunt face. She replayed that instant at the gate, the moment she let the passport fall. One small act, but it had shattered her entire life. She whispered to herself, "Just 1 second. 1 second destroyed everything." No answer came. Only the relentless ticking of the wall clock reminded her of a truth she could not escape. Life does not rewind. At a Cambridge symposium, Maya sat in the audience, listening to experts discuss trust in aviation. During the Q&A session, she unexpectedly stood up. Her heart pounded, but her voice was steady. How can an ordinary passenger believe they will not be treated unfairly? And if that trust is broken, can it ever truly be rebuilt? A professor smiled and replied, "Trust is built with transparency and accountability. And sometimes it begins with one person brave enough to speak out." Applause filled the hall. Maya sat back down, her pulse still racing, but a new conviction rising in her. Perhaps her story was not a burden after all. Perhaps it was a seed, one she could nurture to help transform an entire industry. In an internal FAA report sent to Congress, the name Maya Brooks was cited as a prime example of the devastating consequences of employee misconduct. But alongside it, she was also cited as an example of the power of courage. And in Cambridge, as Maya sat by her window gazing at the grey London sky, she smiled faintly. The road ahead would be long and difficult. But she knew this. From the moment at Gate B42, she was no longer just a student. She was someone carrying on her shoulders a responsibility to an entire system. Autumn mornings in Cambridge carried the scent of damp wood and the sound of birdsong around the campus. Maya Brooks was gradually adjusting to life here. Early classes, laboratories filled with aerodynamic models and lively debates about the future of aviation. Yet inside, she always felt a constant pull, a need to transform the painful experience at JFK into fuel for something greater. During a group project discussion about safety systems in aviation operations, A classmate asked her, "Maya, what do you think is the greatest risk? Equipment? Technology?" She paused, her eyes darkening, and replied, "No. The greatest risk is people. When power falls into the hands of those without responsibility, they can destroy everything. A faulty screw may cause vibrations, but an employee who abuses authority can shake an entire Boeing 707. The group fell silent. An elderly professor overheard and nodded. "That is true, and the duty of your generation is not only to build machines, but to design a transparent system where no one can exploit power to cause harm." Maya etched every word into memory. While Maya was sowing seeds of change in her classroom, in Atlanta, Global Wings was drowning in the shadow of investigation. The headquarters blazed with lights through the night. Emergency meetings piled up, reports stacked like mountains on the table. The FAA announced, "A comprehensive inspection will be conducted across 9 major Global Wings hubs." The media dissected every detail of the scandal, from Carol Hargrove's temper to old passenger complaints the airline had ignored. One news channel replayed the CCTV footage, the frame of Carol dropping the passport into the trash, looping endlessly like a silent indictment. In the boardroom, the Global Wings CEO nearly shouted, "We've lost $300 million in market value in 1 week. Who takes responsibility for this?" Kenji Mori, sitting across, his voice hoarse but steady, answered, "Responsibility belongs to all of us, but I will take the lead on the reform plan. We must turn this scandal into a turning point. If not, the entire airline will collapse." The eyes around the table tightened. They knew Mori was carrying not just the reputation of the airline, but the survival of tens of thousands of employees. In Cambridge, Maya received an invitation to attend a conference on ethics in aviation engineering. At first, she hesitated, but when she looked in the mirror and saw the reflection of a 17-year-old girl, no longer just a victim, but a living witness to abuse of power, Maya knew she could not remain silent. At the conference, when asked about her personal experience, Maya stood. Her voice trembled slightly, but her eyes blazed. "I was once nearly crushed by a minor act of authority used against me, but that only made me realize our generation's responsibility is to ensure such behavior never happens again. Technology alone is not enough. We need transparency. We need the courage to speak up when the system is wrong." The hall erupted in applause. Maya felt her throat tighten, but within, a new sense of purpose took root. Meanwhile, at JFK, FAA audit teams began their reviews. Dozens of employees were summoned for questioning. One older staffer whispered to a colleague, "Just a 17-year-old girl, and she's shaken the entire system." Word of this soon reached Carol Hargrove in temporary detention. She laughed bitterly. "Just 1 second of carelessness, and I lost everything." But deep down, she knew it was not carelessness. It was cruelty she had nurtured, and now it had come back to destroy her. That night, in her dorm room, Maya opened her laptop. On the screen was the latest article from a major newspaper. Maya Brooks, from a powerless passenger to a symbol of aviation reform. She sighed. Maya had never wanted to become a symbol, but now, seeing countless people leaving comments thanking her for speaking out, she understood. This responsibility was larger than her personal wishes. Maya texted her mother, "Mom, I'm afraid I'm not strong enough." Liana Porter replied within seconds, Maya, you don't need to be strong all the time. You only need to be brave in the crucial moments. And you already were. Keep walking forward. The rest, the world will help you change. Maya put down her phone and gazed out the dorm window into the Cambridge night. Above, planes traced delicate streaks of light across the sky. And she knew, one day, she would not just be a passenger. She would be the one redesigning the very system itself. Fairer, more humane. The shadows of crisis were consuming global wings. But in another corner of the world, light was igniting within a young girl in Cambridge. And those two paths, one of collapse, one of beginnings, were destined to cross in ways no one could yet imagine. 4 years after the incident at Gate B42, Maya Brooks was no longer the 17-year-old girl trembling as she clutched her passport. She was now a senior at MIT, majoring in aerospace engineering, a standout face in the research group on flight safety technology and passenger transparency systems. But no matter how far she had come, the memory of JFK remained, like a scar that would never fade. One spring afternoon, Maya received an invitation. International Conference on the Future of Aviation, Washington, D.C. The signature at the bottom bore the seal of the FAA. What made her freeze, however, was not the official crest, but the list of speakers. Kenji Mori, Global Vice President of Customer Experience, Global Wings. Maya sat still, her heart racing. 4 years ago, he had been the man bowing his head to apologize to her at Gate B42. Now, he was the face of the airline's reform. On the day of the conference, the grand hall glowed with lights, hundreds of experts, airline executives, engineers, and journalists filling the seats. Maya walked in with her guest badge, her simple blue dress, making her appear completely different from the FAA girl the press had once portrayed. On stage, Kenji Mori appeared. He looked older, his hair streaked with silver, but his eyes were still sharp. His voice carried through the hall. 4 years ago, Global Wings faced the greatest scandal in its history. A malicious act by one individual forced the entire system to stop. But thanks to the timely intervention of the FAA and the courage of one passenger, we changed. Today, I stand here to say, Global Wings has been reborn. Applause erupted. But among the audience, Maya simply watched in silence. She knew he was speaking about her, without saying her name. After the session, as the crowd dispersed, an assistant approached her. "Miss Brooks." "Mr. Mori would like to see you privately." Maya entered a small conference room behind the stage. Kenji Mori stood there, his back slightly bent, but his eyes still bright. He smiled and extended his hand. "Maya Brooks. It's been a long time." Maya shook his hand, a strange feeling settling over her. She answered softly, "Yes, sir. The last time we met, things were much more chaotic." Kenji chuckled, though the sound carried a trace of bitterness. "Indeed. Gate B42. That day changed the course of my career." Maya tilted her head, listening as he continued, his tone slow and sincere. "When I bowed to apologize to you that day, I thought, if a child could force an entire system to stop, then my responsibility, as someone inside that system, was to make it better. I've lived with that reminder for the past 4 years." He placed a folder on the table and slid it toward Maya. "This is Global Wings' new project. We are building a real time passenger feedback platform with complete transparency. But we need someone who understands the value of transparency better than anyone. I want you to join us." Maya opened the folder. The words, charts, and technical diagrams danced before her eyes. This was nearly identical to the idea she had been nurturing at MIT, her thesis project. Sky Trust. She lifted her gaze, locking eyes with him. "You want me to work for Global Wings, the airline that nearly cost me my dream?" Kenji nodded without hesitation. "Precisely. Because no one understands that wound better than you, and no one can ensure it never happens again better than the one who endured it." Maya fell silent. Memories surged back, the filthy trash bin, Carol's contemptuous glance, her own helpless tears. But mingled with them were her mother's embrace at Heathrow, Kenji's bowed apology, and the admiring looks of her peers at Cambridge. She knew she had the right to refuse, to close the door on the past, and focus solely on research. But a voice inside whispered, "If you walk away, who will make sure another girl never has to live through what you did?" Maya inhaled deeply. "I'll join, but on one condition." Kenji narrowed his eyes. "What condition?" "This project must not be a PR stunt. I want full involvement in designing the system. And I want the FAA, including my mother, to have independent oversight. If you agree, I will give everything I have." Kenji looked at her for a long moment, then laughed, a sound of release. "You've truly grown up." "I agree." As they shook hands, both knew this was not just a partnership. This was the intersection of two paths, a young woman who had once been a victim, and a man who had once stood inside the system. Now both shared the same goal, to make aviation a place where there would never again be another Carol Hargrove. That night, Maya wrote an email to her mother. "Mom, I agreed to work with Global Wings. I know it sounds crazy, but if I want to change things, maybe I have to step inside the system, just like you once did." The reply came almost instantly. "Maya, I believe in you. Remember, true power doesn't come from the seat we occupy, but from how we use it to protect others." Maya smiled faintly and closed her laptop. Outside her window, night flights drew long streaks of light across the sky, and within her, a new certainty rose. She was about to embark on a journey greater than anything she had ever imagined. 1 year after the fateful meeting in Washington, D.C., the name Sky Trust was on every headline in aviation. But it was no longer just Maya Brooks's project at MIT. It had become a global platform, deployed by Global Wings, overseen directly by the FAA, with Maya as its CO leader. On launch day, the Global Wings Hall in Atlanta was packed. Reporters jostled for space, cameras pointed to the stage. Under the dazzling lights, Maya stood there, not the trembling 7-year-old at gate B42, but a young innovator, her eyes burning bright. She spoke, her voice clear, each word striking through the silence. "Sky. Trust is not just technology. It is a commitment that every passenger, from first class to the very last row, has the right to be heard and to be protected. Power no longer rests in the hands of those who abuse it, but returns to where it belongs, the passengers." The hall went silent. Then applause erupted like thunder. Behind her, Kenji Mori's eyes shone with pride. He remembered bowing before her 4 years earlier, Who could have believed that the girl he had once apologized to was now leading a revolution? SkyTrust was simple yet effective. Every passenger could rate and respond immediately after interacting with staff. All data was stored on blockchain, tamper-proof. Any irregularities were instantly flagged and sent to FAA monitors. Absolute transparency. Within the first few months, hundreds of small infractions were detected and addressed. Stories that once stayed hidden, shouting staff, discriminatory behavior, passengers ignored, were exposed to the light. More importantly, customer satisfaction soared. A major newspaper wrote, "Global Wings, once buried in scandal, now a model of reform, thanks to a 21-year-old woman." That evening, Maya stood alone by the hotel window, looking down at the lights of Atlanta. Her heart swelled. She remembered everything. The cold trash bin, Carol's contemptuous glance, the helpless tears, then that decisive call to her mother. Now, when she thought of the past, she no longer saw herself as a victim. She saw herself as living proof that sometimes all it takes is one person standing up to force an entire system to change. Her phone buzzed. A message from her mother. "Maya, I watched the launch. I am prouder than words can say. But remember, technology is just a tool. You are the heart. Never forget that." Maya smiled, her eyes glistening. Meanwhile, in another corner of America, Carol Hargrove sat in a rehabilitation class at a support center for ex-offenders. She heard about SkyTrust through an old radio, the host's cheerful voice mentioning Maya Brooks. Carol closed her eyes. Inside there was no more anger, no more excuses, only the bitter truth. The moment she dropped that passport into the trash, she opened the path for Maya to rise while destroying herself forever. A month later, Maya flew from Boston to D.C. to attend the FAA's annual conference. This time, not as a small passenger, but as an equal speaker. As she stepped onto the stage, her eyes met her mother's. To Liana Porter, sitting in the front row, her gaze ablaze with pride. Maya spoke slowly, firmly. "I once believed justice was a luxury. But then I learned justice exists when we refuse silence. When one person dares to speak, the whole system must shift. And today, I no longer speak only for myself, but for millions of passengers who long for fairness." The entire hall rose, applause roaring. Late that night, after all ceremonies were over, Maya and her mother stepped onto a balcony, gazing at the glowing lights of the Capitol. Liana took her daughter's hand, her voice breaking. "You've gone farther than I ever dreamed. From a single tear at Gate B42, you've turned it into an ocean that reshaped an industry." Maya leaned her head on her mother's shoulder, whispering, "Mum, I only continued the path you opened. You taught me. Strength isn't in a seat or a title, but in the moment we choose to stand. That day at JFK, you stood for me. Today, I stand for everyone." Above them, the sky was calm, airplanes blinking red and green lights as they passed. To Maya, they were no longer just flights carrying passengers. They were proof of a promise that no one would be treated with disdain, that fairness could take flight with every journey. And somewhere, among the travelers of tomorrow, there might be a small girl clutching her passport. But this time, if anyone dares to belittle her, the system will rise on her side. Because once, at Gate B42, a girl named Maya Brooks had forced the world to change. The story of Maya Brooks has come to a close, but its echoes still linger. From a passport thrown into a trash bin, she turned humiliation into fire, injustice into a catalyst for change. And what made this story extraordinary was not that Maya was a genius, nor that she was the daughter of a powerful leader. What was extraordinary was that, in the very moment she was dismissed and belittled, she chose not to remain silent. From the perspective of an expert, this is what must be remembered. Every system, no matter how vast, can collapse because of one small act of wrongdoing. But equally, from a single voice, from one timely decision, that same system can be forced to correct itself. The FAA, global wings, even the entire international aviation industry, all were compelled to change, beginning with a 17-year-old girl who dared to make a call to her mother. This lesson is not just for aviation. It is for all of us. Because power does not always lie in the hands of those with titles. True power emerges when we choose to stand, when we refuse to let silence become complicity. Ask yourself, how many times have you witnessed an act of injustice, something small, a rude employee, someone dismissed because of their appearance, or a decision made without transparency, and you chose to turn away? If that day Maya had chosen to turn away, she would have missed her flight, lost her opportunity, and the world would never have known Sky Trust. That is why this story does not end with Maya. It begins with you. The next time you witness a wrongful act, what will you do? Stay silent or speak up? If this story has made you reflect, leave a comment below. Share the moments when you have witnessed injustice and what you chose to do. Do not forget to hit like and share this video so that more people can understand that fairness is not a privilege, it is a right that must be defended. And make sure to subscribe to join us in the stories to come, where truth, justice, and the power of one individual are brought to light. Because sometimes to change the entire world, all it takes is the courage to say, "No, I will not accept this."